Taken to an extreme, it fuels and perpetuates violence. And we've seen the effects of hate. We've seen the effects of hate-fueled violence in our streets, in our workplaces, and sadly in our schools. We must be vigilant and uncompromising in our collective work. So during these 2 days, please take the opportunity to learn, to listen, to meet your peers and your neighbors, to engage with each other, and to discover how you are going to make your mark. Please enjoy your time and enjoy the conference.
So we're here together, and I realize how short I am because this screen is right in front of me. So welcome everyone. I am Nicola Smith-Key. Everyone calls me Dr. Nikki. I serve as the Senior Project Manager for the Arundel County Hate Crimes Prevention Program under the Office of Equity and Human Rights. This is a federally funded program through the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Program. Over the next 2 days, we will be tackling some heavy but vital topics together. So who is in the room? And Asha started this for me, so thank you. As we get started, I want us to all take a look around, literally, take a look around. Often, we focus on the problems we are here to solve, but today, let's also focus on the power that is sitting in these seats. When we ask who is in the room, the answer is a roadmap for how we can protect Anne Arundel County and our communities. So before we dive in, this is something I typically do at conferences, let's see who is joining us today. We're going to do an interactive roll call. I'm getting you moving for even just a little. Please raise your hand if you are a resident of Anne Arundel County. Look around the room. Thank you. An employee of Anne Arundel County. A resident of another county in Maryland. Beautiful. Visitors from out of state. Raise it high. Thank you. Elected officials, we're so grateful you're here. Thank you. Law enforcement professionals. And I'm going to ask you all to stand because I appreciate you all. Thank you. Other public safety professionals. Thank you. The interfaith community or faith community. Raise your hands. The civil rights advocates. LGBTQ plus champions. School administrators. Higher education partners. Student activists. Victim advocates. Nonprofit partners. Mental health professionals. Business owners. And I might have left off a few, but thank you all for being here. So today's roadmap. Today we'll follow a specific path moving from tragedy and understanding towards healing and collective action. We'll explore, say thank you to Rod, this is Rod. We'll explore a range of topics including trauma-informed approaches for victims, the role of faith leaders in dialogue, and a case presentation on moving from bias incidents to convictions. We will also get an overview of the Arundel County Hate Crimes Reporting Portal to see how these incidents are in our recently launched tool that we're all very proud of. A few reminders. For your comfort, there is breakfast and lunch available in room 168. If you need a moment of reflection, we have our Serenity Room is available in room 330, so you take the elevators and go to the 3rd floor. To keep this as productive as possible, please silence your devices and keep side conversations to a minimum. If you have to take a call, please exit the room. We ask that everyone stays open to different perspectives. That's where the magic happens. If you're lost, if you have questions, look for our staff or volunteers. They're easy to spot by their specific lanyards and badges. So I thought of this at 3 o'clock in the morning because I do not sleep. So this is another who's in the room. Who uses social media? Look around the room. You're going to help us to start a movement. Before the day is done, you take a picture of one of the signs that you see. There are signs on your folders. And before the day is done, you post it on your social media with hashtag standing together against hate, hashtag no hate here, hashtag uncover hate. We have over 200 people registered across the 2 days. This is how a movement starts. So join us in doing that. And I'm getting you involved again in a collective thank you. One of our dear leaders in this community, Honorable Carl Snowden, normally says to people, look to your left, look to your right, look in their eyes and say, I love you. I'm not asking you to do that. I am not. What I'm going to ask you to do, that got you all tickled. What I'm going to ask you to do is look to someone to your left or right and say, thank you for being here. Now, I have the distinct honor and privilege to introduce our opening keynote speaker for this inaugural Standing Together Against Hate Conference. Joining us today is a woman and a family who have turned profound personal loss into a powerful legacy of advocacy and systemic change. Mrs. Dawn M. Collins has been married to her husband, Richard Collins, Jr., for 39 years. Together, they have 2 wonderful children, Richard W. Collins III and Robin Collins. Dawn is a program analyst with the Food and Drug Administration with 15 years of experience. She specializes in ensuring public health through oversight of food safety processes and consumptions throughout the United States. She's a powerful force in the workplace and uses her positive attitude and tireless energy to encourage others to work hard and succeed. Mrs. Collins is a prominent leader in several prestigious service organizations and social justice initiatives. She's a member of Jack and Jill Incorporated, Links Incorporated, board member of the Calvert League of Women Voters, co-founder of the Social Justice Alliance between the University of Maryland, College Park, and Bowie State University. And we have representatives from both here, and I'm just going to ask them to raise their hands, and you'll hear from them later today. Thank you for being here. She's also the co-founder of the Second Lieutenant Richard W. Collins Foundation. The foundation is dedicated to championing social justice and inspiring future leaders. Ms. Dawn?
I can speak loudly, and I say, people can't give me what I want, and that is my son. So whom shall I fear? Dr. Nikki, what I have for you is an old military tradition. It's called a challenge coin. It's the same thing that I was able to give to Secretary Clinton and to President Joe Biden. Thank you. As State's Attorney, I'm going to add a little bit to what you said. That hate crime law changed because as a result of the death and murder of Lieutenant Richard W. Collins III. Good morning. First, I want to thank Arundel County Hate Crime Prevention Program and its critical partners for inviting me, a mom with a broken heart, to be a part of this important conference, dialogue, and the call for the end of hate crimes in our country, in our state, and in our nation. Because see, I am an American. I am a black woman. And my son was third generation military. But sadly enough, there was someone from Anne Arundel County who didn't think we should live. I am a wife and the mother of 2 children, and I am a patriot, as I just said. My son, Lieutenant Richard Collins, became a man at Lee State University, a historically black university producing exceptional scholars, leaders dedicated to service to this nation. When my son, Lieutenant Collins, told me that the world would know his name, I never imagined that being a victim of a senseless, disgusting act of hate would be a part of his legacy. A mother hopes for her children to do well, to make choices, and experience more. To achieve more, to live more fully, but that was not the reality for my son. Someone who was ready to give his life up, every one of you in this room. So today I want to share with you a number of truths. You must know specifically about a mother's journey, mine. And let me explain this to you. I'm not the only one. So many, many mothers. And the domino effect of hate and the impact of hate crimes, especially on black and brown families in this state and country. First, I want you to know that hate crime doesn't just result in the loss and the effect of that single bond that I had with my beloved son. I want to remember the day when my son was born. I remember his first steps. I remember his first words. I remember the first day that he went to pre-K. And I was that mom that stood out there for an hour till the teacher told me that I needed to leave. So I know I poured into my child. I'm holding the tension of pride in his choice to serve this nation. Remember, I said he was third generation military. I remember when my husband and I pinned on my son's uniform his completion, his bars, to become an officer in the United States military, a part of the Bulldog Battalion at Bowie State University. Feeling an immense pride, celebration, and joy. And feeling like maybe our parenting actually worked. Maybe we did what God, my God, commissioned us to do. And I remember opening the door when I didn't open that door, my husband opened the door, when two law enforcement people came to the door, hearing the words, not wanting to believe what they said. How could this happen? Excuse me. My son, who I gave birth to, who I held in my arms, who I feared for being a black man in America, who was on his way. And I remember the sound of the casket being closed and wheeled out of the church in front of servicemen and women and legislatures. I want you to remember that before we can talk about the advocacy, the policy, the aftershock, we must first talk about a bond that a mother has with her child. But a three-strand cord is not easily broken. Do you understand that? And you must know that the attempt to serve that bond, the hate, will not happen. It still hurts every day when I wake up. Every day I see a cadet. Every day that I see a military officer, knowing the potential that my son, slated to be an intel officer on his way to Korea with this nation. The second thing I want everyone to remember, that the loss of a child is like losing a limb. The space is ever empty and never refilled. Civil rights activists, author, and strategist, Ella Baker once said, until the killing of black men and black mothers become as important to this country as the killing of a white mother's son, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until this happens. My family and so many other victims and surviving loved ones of hate still haven't found rest from this type of blatant injustice. So I stand here today knowing I am not the first mother to experience this loss. I'm also reminded of many mothers, caregivers, and families affected by hate crimes throughout the course of this nation. In 1954, and I had the privilege of meeting his first cousin, the mother, I want to change that. In 1954, the mother of my father-in-law whose son came home, North Carolina, from the Korean War. This was my father-in-law. Walking down the streets of eastern North Carolina on his way home to his family, when a white man approached him. Didn't know my father-in-law, didn't care to know him. Approached him and opened fire. Mind you, this is the story he told. He said, and it's written in court documents, I thought he was looking in someone's window, so I went and got my shotgun and I killed him. In 1954, this man never served one day in jail, ever. In 1955, Mamie Till, who I had the privilege of meeting her first cousin, the mother of 13-year-old Emmett Till, who was tortured and lynched in Mississippi by a mob of white men. And sadly to say, there are people that I know, that I've spoken with in Mississippi, who never heard of Emmett Till. And on May 20th, 2017, our family, the family of Lieutenant Richard W. Collins III, was murdered on the campus of the University of Maryland College Park, the premier university in the state, and a predominantly white university. By a follower of white supremacist ideals. And on August 2027, my dear friend Susan Breaux, mother of Heather Hyatt, a 32-year-old white paralegal killed in Charlottesville. At a counter protest of Unite the Right by a white male while standing alongside black and brown men and women who were peacefully protesting. Each of these women, including myself, have been denied the joy of seeing our children and young adults reach their full potential. But without a fight, not without a stand, not without letting the whole world know who our beloved children are. Despite the unimaginable weight and burden it is for me to stand here, we do not stand in the shadow of our past. We are moving forward by bringing a different set of victims' life, like myself and my husband. My family and my friends are all survivors. When churches, synagogues, nightclubs, bus stops are no longer safe zones, how do we ever return to a normal life? More importantly, what's the next for us? For the survivors. And I'm going to say this. Oftentimes we think of the monsters, the murderers. What about the survivors? What about the ones who continually cry? What about the ones that can't be a dog Collins to stand in front of a wonderful audience like yourself? We all have the power to do the work, to revive justice for those who are no longer with us. So I speak for Lieutenant Collins. We work more for legislation. We work more for convictions. And we work to make sure that they stay incarcerated. Much of the work started long before us, and it continues with victories like the law in the state of Maryland that I just spoke about to strengthen hate crimes. Now, in my opinion, that I've learned to say from all the good attorneys that I know, There were some disgusting things on his Facebook page and his phone. And it is my opinion that if I can look at your phone, I can tell you who you are and what's important to you. So to see those types of things on the perpetrator's phone, in my opinion, gave me an idea as to who he was. Lastly, I want to leave you with a mother's plea. Maybe Till's civil rights activist and mother Emmett Till, another son, another one killed. The murder of my son has shown me, this is what she said, the murder of my son has shown me what happens to any of us better be the business of all of us. Can't be a spectator in this one. So I'm going to say to you, will you join me? I want you to raise your hand if you are a parent, a guardian, or a caretaker. Raise your hand if you are a grandparent. Raise your hand if you're a godparent, if you're an aunt, if you're an uncle, if you're a sibling, if you're a mentor. Most of us raise our hands in this room. So therefore we hold one of the many roles that I mentioned. You carry the responsibility of being better. As I close, I challenge you to think of Lieutenant Collins. As you think of your son, as you think of your daughter, think of my baby boy. About how I should have been able to say, maybe one day I could be a grandmother. Think about Lieutenant Collins when you hear Steve's voices calling, asking perhaps, or yelling too loudly. Think of Lieutenant Collins when you laugh at your children's jokes. As a mother who has outlived her son due to the evils of this hate in this country and world, I know the solution will take more than most of us in this room. It will take longer than most of us have on this planet. It will require strength that only could come from a fight born out of pain. And I have enough for every one of you in this room. It will require a bond of unity, honesty, accountability, and true justice. So I want to thank each of you for your time, for listening to this mother's heart. Pay attention to the next symposium we'll be having at the University of Maryland College Park. Take a look at my website. Follow us in the fight. Because if anyone knows Dawn Collins, and you can ask those that know me in this room, until the good Lord transitions me, I continually speak about a man that was willing to give his life. But there was someone that just saw the color of his skin and didn't care, didn't know, didn't want to know. And also, see this lovely t-shirt? They will continue to help us support cadets as they become officers in the United States military. Thank you.
Silence is golden. We'll take a minute to just be. If you want to close your eyes, if you want to do some deep breathing, just be. Deep breath in and out. Another deep breath in and out. Last one, in and out. Our next panel is a trauma-informed approach to victims of hate crimes, and I'm going to ask the speakers to come forward, please. There are tissue boxes strategically placed around the room. We knew this was going to be necessary, so please do not be shy. I'm a very messy crier. And remember also, we have the Serenity Room upstairs, room 330.
In that room, we have a puzzle. We have a puzzle. We have yoga mats, and you can just sit and eat. So please feel free to do that.
How are we doing? We're ahead of time. That's amazing. So we're going to take our time to get into this panel.
Can you hear me? From the microphone? No. Technology.
Technology. There we go. Can be a great thing, can be a bother. So welcome to this critical session, a trauma-informed approach to victims of hate crimes. Today we gather with a shared intention to bridge the gap between professional protocol and the human experience of profound trauma. We heard Ms. Dawn's story when those two officers came to her door. They were not the most empathetic, and so how do we change how we do things? Hate crimes do not just impact an individual. They are projected outward, sending a message of vulnerability to entire communities and often shattering a victim's worldview and the sense of societal trust. Some of us would have experienced that, might have experienced that, or we know someone who has. We recognize that the trajectory of a victim's recovery and the restoration of public trust is often determined by the very first moments of a police response or encounter. To lead us into this discussion, we are honored to be joined by Chief Inspector Altavis Love Craighead, a friend of mine. She's a 30-year veteran of the Philadelphia Police Department. Chief Inspector Love Craighead brings a unique dual perspective. She has dedicated her career to developing curricula that help officers navigate their own personal traumas while effectively supporting individuals in acute distress through empathy and understanding. So just so you know, the flow of this session, we'll start with a brief introduction for our local law enforcement experts, and then Chief Inspector Altavis Love Craighead will then share her powerful insights as both a veteran officer and a survivor on supporting those in acute distress. We will wrap up with an open conversation among our panelists on practical, street-level ways to de-escalate crisis and protect the dignity of everyone targeted by hate. Our goal is simple: to find real-world, trauma-aware solutions that make every neighbor feel safe and supported. With that, let's get started. So I'll ask Officer Benson to introduce yourself.
I'm Officer Benson. I'm Officer Benson. I've been with the Indianapolis Police Department for 16 years. I'm the only full-time CIT officer with Indianapolis Police. I work hand in hand with Lieutenant Thomas through Anne Arundel County Crisis Response, and I've been doing that for the last 2.5 years.
Thank you. Lieutenant Thomas?
Good morning. My name is Steve Thomas. I'm a lieutenant with the Anne Arundel County Police. I've been the CIT coordinator for the last 11 years. And we coordinate the follow-up mental health that we do to help the community and officers alike, which we'll talk about in more detail.
Sergeant Kirkleman?
Good morning, I'm Sergeant Janine Kirkleman. I work with Anne Arundel Community College, Department of Public Safety. I'm the prevention specialist here on campus.
Good morning, everyone. I don't usually start off crying. I always cry, but I don't start off crying. But Miss Dawn got to me, and I just couldn't help it. So I'll just ask that you bear with me. I always bring notes because I always cry, so it helps me keep my pace. But by way of introduction, I think it helps to know who's speaking to you, where they're coming from, before you can fully listen to what they have to say. So I want to tell you my backstory. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We were a very close-knit family. Me, my 3 sisters, and my 1 brother were raised by a single mom who worked at the prison system as a drug and alcohol counselor. My mother sold Mary Kay cosmetics on the side to help make ends meet. I was aware from a very young age that we didn't have much and not to ask for much. I remember growing up, hanging out with my 3 friends. That's us. Let me see, where are we? At the top left. That's us right there. We were teenagers and we always monitored the police to make sure they were doing the right thing. We called ourselves the FBI. In this picture, we're just slightly older than teenage. I don't know where this interest in making sure people are doing the right thing came from, but it led me to enter the Philadelphia Police Academy. All my girlfriends applied to join the police academy, but I was the only one to keep at it. The PPD is the 4th largest department in the country with over 6,500 sworn officers and 800 civilian employees. I started in patrol and then I worked as a detective. For 2 years, I investigated international terrorism with the FBI, not my girlfriend version. I found myself advancing through the police department for selfish reasons. I needed to make more money. I became a police captain of a police district that was in a predominantly African American neighborhood. This is where I learned to master trauma-informed policing. I then became a police inspector of Central Police Division. There, I was responsible for 4 police districts, more than 158,000 residents, across multicultural neighborhoods, and approximately 600 officers came under my charge. This area was the entertainment area of the city. There were often more than 300,000 daily visitors to that area. I then became a police chief inspector of the Community Relations Bureau, where I was able to show officers how to engage in meaningful ways. By the time I left the police department, I was the chief inspector of the police academy, where I was responsible for annual in-service training, firearms training for the entire department, and new police officers. Despite all that I had accomplished, I was always drawn back to my community and the original reasons why I got into policing in the first place. With my ongoing work as police captain, inspector, and chief inspector, my work with the deputy commissioner within victim services, where I had the opportunity to institute system-wide policy tied to trauma-informed policing, and with opportunities to give talks like this, I feel like, in many ways, my work is coming to a powerful full circle. And that's because of something that happened back in 1997. On March 26, 1997, my family's world was shattered when my only brother, Emir Green, was shot and murdered in the city of Philadelphia involving street drug activity. As it states on the website of Emir, Every Murder is Real, which is named after my brother, it's a nonprofit my mother, sisters, and I created in honor of my brother to support families and community members dealing with the trauma of violence and homicide by promoting healing. My brother was a good son and a protective brother. My brother was a comedian. He was always the life of the party. He was the type of person who through his laughter could make people feel better. And he was always sensitive to how other people felt. I can tell you all the things that happened to him that led to his murder, which includes deep-seated racism so many African Americans still face today, abuse from a heroin-addicted father from whom he felt the need to protect us, his search for a father figure on the streets outside of the house, where he got involved with the wrong people whom he thought were his friends. I can tell you about my brother's deep desire for acceptance that led to activity in drug sales. I'm not condoning any of this. I'm just trying to give a fuller picture of my brother, a fuller picture that's never viewed. Because when you're murdered while involved in street drug activity, what often happens is the whole of the person who got murdered, what he was like, who he truly was, what happened to him, the struggles he dealt with, a family's deep loss, all the collateral damage, and even the murder of itself, it all gets overshadowed by the illegal activity. Much of what I heard was from other officers at that, just another drug dealer off the streets. Even family and friends would just dismissively say things like, well, what did you expect? Or when are you going to get over it? Why did people do this? I believe they are looking for reasons to explain why people do such horrible things to each other. Labeling someone as a person who creates harm allows people the opportunity to not think deeply about what is really happening. There was and still is little to no discussion about the causes or the impact of the murder on the family and our community, or who the murder victim was and what happened to him along the way before his murder. Because I've experienced both sides, I can tell you that there's a lot to be gained on both sides if our policing is more trauma-informed, if we have greater understanding of the causes and the impact of murders like this, the people behind the statistics. There's some police officers who already seem to have an intuition about this. There are some who stand out in my mind during the time of my brother's murder, Detective Konzak and Weaver. They were on it. But many of us, most police officers, we don't come to the force with this intuition and understanding. And that's why I started trauma-informed policing. Trauma-informed policing is actually practices, protocols, and policies that recognize and appropriately address the complexities of trauma experienced by survivors and perpetrators to prevent further traumatization and improve the impact of police intervention. But to understand the definition of trauma, you need to know, trauma-informed policing, you need to understand what trauma is. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration defines trauma as individual trauma that results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. It is important to understand that trauma can affect not just individuals, but entire communities. So, trauma presents itself in so many different ways. Signs of stress can look minimal to uncontrolled. Some people experiencing trauma can be hypervigilant. Even those who look tuned out, their tuning out might be their best way of dealing with the onslaught of stimuli. Others can come across as jumpy, irritated, or even paranoid, which police officers could interpret as being angry, adversarial, aggressive, hostile, non-cooperative, or even suspicious. My family went through the grieving process, essentially burying my brother and trying to put our lives back together. It was during this time that I began to notice those things that people were saying. Well, what did you expect? Live by the sword, die by the sword. I can tell you, it's something that you never get over. You learn to live a new life with murder always lingering. It never goes away. So, during my days off from policing, I volunteered as a crisis responder. I belonged to a group that would support communities after crisis, like natural disasters or large-scale violence. I noticed the strategies they used and realized that they weren't embedded in the Philadelphia Police Department. So I made it my business to make it part of the policies and procedures. And some of those strategies were ventilation and validation. That's simply listening and not being judgmental. Ensuring the victim that what they're feeling is normal for the abnormal situation they've experienced. Safety and security. Addressing safety and security concerns of the victim. This may mean figuring out a safety plan for them, accompanying them to the detective's office, helping them find ways to secure their property if their home was violated, contacting family members, or even providing a ride to family just to be more supportive. Prediction and preparation. Explaining the criminal justice process at each step of the way. This allows the victim to understand that this process won't go on forever and that there is an end. These basic skills involve being a listening ear without being judgmental. It means being curious and supportive. And when you don't have the expertise, then knowing when and where to refer people. It also includes understanding how you speak to people, the words you use, and the tone. Trauma from policing is knowing to ask, what happened to you, instead of, what's wrong with you? It's just being curious about people and their backstory. Everybody has a backstory worth listening to, like my story. Supporting the victim and others affected and moving forward with the criminal investigation often goes hand in hand. Understanding trauma will assist officers with rightfully identifying victims' behavior as traumatic and not attempts to avoid assisting in the investigation. Take an interrogation, for example. If I close the space between me and you, and you're upset, and you're trauma-filled, how does that make you feel? It's uncomfortable. That'll make a victim shut down. Following through on promises and not making promises you can't keep. This develops trust. It promotes cooperation throughout the entire investigation. Sometimes a shooting victim who can't remember what happened, I hear the police officers, "Who shot you?" "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know? You were there." But what happens is trauma takes over your brain and all of the emotions hit you all at once. I tell the officers, give them time to sit with their emotions because they're processing it and they're thinking who, what, where, when, why, and how. Give them time to come down. Don't just say they don't cooperate, but come back later because I bet you they put some of the pieces of that puzzle together. The interesting twist of becoming more trauma-informed as a police officer is that you may also identify your own symptoms of trauma. Exposure to violence, what we see every day as police officers, it can make us more prone to violent behavior. And by profession, we exhibit some of the trauma behaviors that we see in others. Take, for instance, hypervigilance. Our heads are always on a swivel. And I even say when I was working at my desk, when I was a captain, I would sit at my desk and I always listen to the police radio. And it would go doop. That doop means there's a priority call coming. I would go to the edge of my seat, because if it's something serious, I'm running out there. And I would wait for the officers to get there, and they would say, "I found it." Okay, I sit back in my seat, keep doing my work. Boop! Here I go again. And I wait for the officers, because if it's serious, I'm running out. This is me at my desk. Imagine the officers in the police car, going from crisis to crisis to crisis. So, it's important that we are able to see signs of trauma in ourselves and seek support from fellow officers and others who can help us when we need it. Otherwise, our internalized trauma, left unaddressed, can contribute to negative consequences, unnecessary police-related confrontations, and even police shootings, and even suicide within our forces. So essentially, if we're not trauma-informed, we won't be as effective in helping the communities we are called to serve. Thank you.
So Chief Inspector, you just spoke, but I'm putting you back on the...
Great.
Yeah, because I can. What would you say is the biggest challenge in putting together a trauma-informed approach for a department?
I'd like to think that police officers were human beings, although some people think we're robots. The unfortunate part is when we're often moving in work, is go, 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 so it can feel robotic. And I think some of the biggest hurdles is getting us to slow down and realize that something like this is effective. And so just switching the officer's brain from all enforcement to more supportive in some places. It doesn't mean giving up enforcement, because we still need enforcement, but just to be more supportive and understanding that that goes hand in hand with enforcement. And I think because of that, it's important that we have it institutionalized, meaning put it on paper, make it part of your policy, and then go. And it would be very helpful if the upper echelon are on board, because if they buy into it, then the officers will buy into it.
Thank you, ma'am. Sergeant Kirkleman, I know you were responsible for creating the trauma-informed policing in your department. What was the specific impetus or turning point that led to you creating a trauma-informed policing curriculum for your department? And why was it important to tailor this training to our community's unique needs and specific stressors both community and officers face?
Thank you, Dr. Well, I wish when I put this training together that I knew what you said, because I would have reached out to you. So a few years ago, our college received a federal grant through the Office of Violence Against Women, and we developed a coordinated community response team. As a co-chair for the law enforcement group, I was required to develop training every year for our department. One of the subjects we found that needed some tweaking was trauma-informed response. I did some research. I discovered the work of Dr. Rebecca Campbell from Michigan State University, as well as James Hopper. He's an independent consultant. And their research is on the neurobiology of trauma. And that's how the brain stores traumatic events and how they process it, as we heard earlier. I put the training out in two parts. The first was on the neurobiology of trauma. This went out to all of our officers in the department, from communications all the way up to command staff. I gave the officers a pre-evaluation and then a post-evaluation after the training to measure what they had learned from the training that was given. They did very well. The response was overwhelmingly positive, which I was happy to see. We then put them on the second half of this training through a practical. And they were, in this practical scenarios, live people, they had to respond with trauma-informed interviewing. They all did very well. I was very pleased to see that. And very receptive to the training. I think it was a little eye-opening for some of them. They had not seen it before. Some of our more seasoned officers had had it. We also send our officers to CIT training with Lieutenant Thomas and his group. Phenomenal training. It's the best. So here on the campus, we serve a very diverse range of students. We have, as well as our staff and faculty, but we have students that come in from the Jump Stop program, high school, all the way through seniors. They come from all over the county, as well as counties outside of Arundel, surrounding counties. And we also have international students as well. When they come to the campus, they come with their stressors already, their traumas already. They're juggling their schoolwork, they're juggling their jobs, their home life, childcare. So we need to, as officers, respond in a compassionate and educational approach. And that's how we
Thank you so much. And this panel was really important to us for community to understand the day-to-day of law enforcement and some of the work that they're doing to be more responsive to community. Lieutenant Thomas, how can first responders and service providers balance the need for efficient evidence collection with the need to avoid re-traumatization of the victim during the initial interaction? So I'll ask the question again. How can first responders and service providers balance the need for efficient evidence collection with the need to avoid re-traumatization of the victim during the initial interaction?
So the key is to be helpful and not hurtful at that time. And through that is using skills taught in psychological first aid. It's first, not having sympathy for someone, but having empathy. And there's a big difference of not feeling sorry for someone and feeling with them. And recognizing that as we're there to be helpful. It was said earlier, we all have our own life stories. We all have our own trauma. And a key, one of the things that wasn't said about trauma, it's in the eye of the beholder. What is traumatic to me may not be traumatic to Amanda. What may be traumatic to Amanda may not be traumatic to me. But understanding we all have our own reactions due to our own life experience. And there is no normal reaction. We're all going to be different, and we all are going to grieve different in our own time frames. And it's recognizing when we're grieving, and grief is the loss of anything. When we grieve, it's our grief, and we can't judge it on anyone else's grief. And there's no time frame, there's no standards. Everyone's different, and it's recognizing that we're all different as humans, but also treating people as a human and understanding that being patient and using those skills that are taught, understanding that everyone's going to have different needs as well. When we reach out, and one of the first things we want to do is recognize the Maslowian needs and ask them, what do they need? And again, everyone's going to be different with that response.
Thank you, Lieutenant. And as they're talking, I want you all to continue thinking about hate crime and hate bias incidents. When someone reaches out to law enforcement, this is something they have experienced, and we ought not minimize it. Oh, is that really a hate crime? Oh, did they really mean that? For me, it is. For me, that's how it came across, and so we need to respect that. Officer Benson, I'm coming to you. Can you share a specific best practice or success story where a trauma-informed approach significantly improved a victim's engagement with the justice system?
First, we have to realize that when someone is calling the police department, they're calling them on their worst day. The fact that, the most tragic thing in their lives may have happened that day, and they're reaching out to you to call them. So just an officer's sheer presence could shut somebody down, whether it be based off of the way they look. Their mannerisms might be the same as the looks and the mannerisms of the person that is the suspect involved in that incident. So that may cause somebody to quickly shut down and not want to speak. And that's when you have to get to the root of those issues. And you have to understand those things, the way, how they're feeling. They might shy away. You've got to kind of gain their trust. You can't rush into it. Some things you just have to say, take your time. I'm here, not just, okay, what happened to you? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, they can't remember because they're still in that headspace because people are calling you right as things happen. Well, this just happened to me 5 minutes ago, and you're asking me all these questions. I can't even breathe. So you have to take that time, take a step back, slow the pace a little bit. I went through, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the instinctual trauma response training. And it was, you tell your story by drawing pictures.
Obviously, we can't do it the day you take the report, but maybe after you leave, hey, why don't you try this? Draw pictures of what happened prior to this incident. And then you draw a picture of the storyline of what happened during that incident. And then again, how are you going to recover from that incident? What are you going to do? What have you done? And then you lay it all out, however long it is, and you tell your story from start to finish. And once you go through that training, you realize when someone's writing out their story, you can see the stress, you can hear them getting upset. But when they sit in front of you and they tell their entire story start to finish, it's almost like that weight is lifted off. Because I told my story, my way, you listen, this is what happened to before the incident, this is what happened during the incident, and this is what happened after the incident. And it's just being there. At the end of the day, we're all human. You know, take off this badge, take off this gun, we're all the same. And I think that that's what we have to do. We can't treat it as I'm here to take a report and I'm leaving, goodbye, get on with your life. Sometimes you have to be a little more personal about it.
Thank you. And I know going through CIT training and typical law enforcement, it's almost going against each other. Because CIT is saying, slow down, take your time. Traditional policing is saying, get to it and move on quickly. And so this is really introducing something new or not so new in law enforcement. And many departments around the country are embracing trauma-informed policing. This is open to all, so anyone who wants to answer. In your experience, what are the most critical community resources needed to support healing that are currently missing in your department or in many other jurisdictions? I'll say the question again. In your experience, what are the most critical community resources needed to support healing that are currently missing in many jurisdictions?
I think the main thing is communication. We all agree on a lot of things, and we just don't know sometimes how to communicate those needs. And I think that sometimes if we step on our communication level up, that we actually have a lot of resources, even just within this room, that we could help each other at one point or another get the things that we need to make things a little bit better.
And I'll add that we do better than most, but letting officers know it's okay not to be okay, and recognizing their own lived experience. I'm proud to say that of an agency around 800 sworn, and this is a guesstimate, and this is from talking clinicians that we link officers to, we probably have about 60 to 70 officers that routinely seek mental health assistance through therapy. Now, it depends on each, and again, through confidentiality. I know of some I don't, but that's talking to the officers. One of the biggest challenges we have now is vetting appropriate mental health professionals to help officers. And why I say that is understanding officers, understanding first responder trauma, where clinicians, we've had issues of clinicians getting caught up almost like it's a live episode of Cops and losing touch of why they're there. So it's understanding that. It can be very difficult with shift work and other things for scheduling and even confidentiality with that. Another is, and this is universal, not just with us, again, it goes back to what was said earlier about instead of asking someone what's wrong with them, what have they experienced? And understanding their behavior is, and this is both community members and officers, their reaction is actually a trauma response leading to that behavior that's leading to them getting in trouble, but understanding what that root cause is and addressing that root cause.
And our last question goes back to Chief Inspector Love Craighead. How can agencies build trust with marginalized communities that may have historical reasons for distrusting authorities?
That's a heavy question.
And it's open to others as well.
I think police, they want to be inclusive. The job requires that they do. But I don't think they realize whether they're doing a good job at it or not. They'll always say, yeah, we invite the community, tell them come on out. Sometimes they don't want to come to your place because they don't want people to see them coming to your place. Or sometimes they've never encountered police before and they just don't like that look. So I think it's understanding that you really have to be flexible. There's nothing wrong with saying to them, what issue do you have that you want us to address? Because we can address the issues we believe are important and their issues as well. It's benefiting both of us. So I often would tell my community, you don't have to come to my town hall meeting, you have a meeting. You invite whoever you want. You just tell me where to come and when to be there, and I'll be there. And believe it or not, we got a lot of work done that way. When the group was in charge and made things move, and all I had to do was do my part and follow up.
And the last question for everyone, any final words? We didn't have question and answer scheduled for this session, but we're actually on time. We're ahead of time. Because it's Nikki. So we're going to open up for questions for a few minutes. We'll start with you, Lieutenant. Any final words?
And I think it's just recognizing, something that Amanda said, that we are all human. All of us have our own lived experience, recognizing that, and taking our time, changing the mentality of being helpful, understanding how people are affected by trauma, and going back and instead of asking what's wrong with you, what have you experienced, and looking far upstream to provide assistance for that.
Amanda?
I think too, to look at police, because you never know what kind of things they have gone through in their life, with them personally, their loved ones, because you'd be surprised on how many things that maybe they can help with because they can relate, honestly, because they've had that loved one that has suffered through certain things, and we're human too.
I think in this county, we are so very fortunate to have the multidiscipline resources that we have working together. I've talked to other officers outside of the county that find what we have available, wishing that they had had that in their jurisdictions, and feeling very fortunate if they've come to me and gone through your training, that it's priceless to have that. Any final words?
Just that being trauma-informed is not relegated to police and community. It works for doctor-patient relationships. It works for university-student relationships. It works everywhere. And so I just want to remind you all that even from a community perspective, that you can move in a trauma-informed way as well to support each other.
Thank you so much. So, we're opening up for a few questions. You can raise your hands and you'll be identified to ask a question. We have 1, then 2, and some of you are still waiting to see if you want to ask a question. That's fine. To ask a question, you have to use the table mics. You have to push the button. When you're done, you have to turn it off. It's a question. It's not a dissertation. So, 1, 2, then 3. Press and hold. Press and hold.
Good morning. Thanks everybody for the information. Thank you for a great presentation. My question is for Chief Inspector Love Craighead, or really anybody on the panel per se. You know, we all have biases, right? We talked about how our law enforcement officers are not robots, are humans like everyone else. But how impactful are those biases, whether they're racial bias, faith bias, sex bias, on having effective trauma-informed policing? And what recommendations do you all have for law enforcement agencies to deal with the biases initially to have more effective trauma-informed policing in their departments?
I think it comes down to understanding that we all have biases. Every one of us have biases, and a lot of times some of those biases is what keeps you safe. You know, when you get the little hairs in the back of your neck. But also you have to remember those biases are obstacles as well. And it took me a long time to practice the trauma-informed policing and understand my own biases. But you have to also understand that biases is also what causes trauma to people. And oftentimes it compounds the trauma. And so you'll be trauma-filled because somebody treated you with hate. And then you turn around and you have to deal with a family member that just lost someone. The trauma can be compounded over and over and over again. And so it takes practice. It takes, in regular life, it takes practice. Because your bias hits you, and sometimes you're not even aware of it. Until you stop in your tracks and you're saying to yourself, oh my God, I can't believe I responded that way to that person. And so it just takes practice. You have to be able to point it out, you have to see it, you have to know it, and then start moving in a way where you can see it from your own perspective. It takes a long time. And officers, listen, I had we used to take back the corner. You know, we go to the corner, invite the community out. It'd be a little celebration, and I would see some of the officers like standing off to the side. And then one time, there's somebody playing music, boom, 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 and we're like, don't they see us out here? We have an event. So I go to find out where the music is coming from. Well, the officers bolted past me, and I'm like, well, sheesh, you're a boss. They just think you can't do any work. So I continue looking for the house that's making the noise. The officer got there before me. The guy's at the door. And the officer said something to him. I don't know what he said. And the guy looked at him and turned his head. So understand, we get the bias too. And then I walked up. I was like, hey, how you doing? He looks at me. You know, we have an event today. You want to come to the event? No. Well, let me ask you a question. Can you help me out? Can you just turn it down for at least for a half hour? Simple as that. He turned the music down. It's as simple as that.
Part of it is also when we recognize our own biases and knowing that we need to tap out. And what I mean by that is when we're affected by our own. And I apologize, this is a horrific, I'm a storyteller when I teach, and this is a horrific story. But I believe it was 3 years ago, this time of year, we had the suicide death of a transgender child. And the child was actually the victim of hate from their father that led to their death. And being there as a helper, I recognized my bias towards Dad being able to help. And I had to tap out because I knew my bias was affecting what I was doing in my response to help Dad, who's a grieving father, who was also a person with hate. So with that, in our department, not to that extreme, but we do hate bias training, and the key is for us to recognize our own and recognizing when it affects our response and being able to say, I am not the person to be here, someone else has to. Police culture, that can be very difficult because early on you are taught, you're a post, you handle it, you're there, you handle it. And it's changing that kind of a culture to say it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to call upon someone else to take care of the community.
folks. Respecting Dr. Mickey's request to not have a parking lot presentation, I want to say thank you to the panel and your time for your continued service and our service to our communities. My question is, how is your agency ensuring that current data collection accurately captures and reflects the lived experiences of minoritized populations that include our racially minoritized communities, our sex and gender minoritized communities, as Officer Lieutenant Thomas was mentioning, and people with disabilities? How are we ensuring that the data captures these individuals so when we have to sift through it, we can pull out the narrative necessary to enact that change?
Actually, I'm not the appropriate person to answer that with data aspects of whatsoever. So,
I can say for the Philadelphia Police Department, we're very good at criminal statistics. Very good at it. Not much else. And in their defense, they're getting better at being more trauma informed. But I still don't see the push to the data for that just yet. And I would imagine they'll get there at some point. They just hired a civilian director of counseling. And so baby steps, but they're getting there, but not just yet.
Thank you for the answer.
And if you send me an email, I promise I will work with the police department to do a webinar on that. But also later today we have a presentation on our newly launched reporting portal, which we're excited to talk to you about.
Good morning. You mentioned CIT training. I don't think anyone explained what that was. Could someone expand on that a bit?
absolutely. So we do a lot of mental health training in the academy, but that is for entry level. CIT training, and a little bit about CIT. It was created for the Memphis model in 1988. A person with a mental health challenge was unjustly killed by the Memphis Police Department. The police department then partnered with the University of Memphis and came up with the CIT model of training. The key is it's more than training, it's actually the passion to have everyone in the community working together to help people in crisis. The training aspect, though, is 40 hours of hands-on training to teach empathy, understanding, and de-escalation skills for people in crisis. So it's a Monday through Friday. We have a lot of people with lived experience come in and teach themselves. We have community professionals coming in and teaching. The key is you can't make it mandatory. It has to be voluntary because you want people in the training that want those skills, have the passion to help. And we're teaching them skills, procedures, and the community resources to utilize to help people in crisis as well as their families and their friends.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you to everyone who asked a question. I still don't think we heard what CIT is. It's crisis intervention training. And Houston Police Department, for instance, they did their own, and they call it crisis intervention teams. The federal government over the last few years has created a duplicate of the CIT training to give other departments an opportunity to do less hours. Because the original CIT training is 40 hours, and if you can imagine, many departments are very small. Fun fact, almost 70% of departments in this country are less than 50% sworn. And for you to take officers off for 40 hours, that's a lifetime. So they do have a 24-hour training as well that's available to some departments that some departments have been doing. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your, we're out of time. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. This slide will be up throughout the day for you to see who our sponsors and partners are. And now we have a break, a brief break, a 10-minute break. So probably 4 minutes to the time, people are going to be saying, go back in. And when we come back in, we have a faith leader session, which will be fabulous. Thank you.
We'll see if it's really cute. Yeah. I would always, that's what I was going to be like, okay.
You'll go pick one.
Chief Simpson. Hi, how are you? Sorry. No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah. Such a big event. Did I do a live
Can we give me another one? My father just in a while.
Oh my God! Yeah, I know. Yeah. But anyway,
I'll take a picture card again. We worked together several hours. We see each other. We worked in church together last year, like Christine or something.
Yeah.
And then we was up at my life event. One.
I know.
Working several events. Are you guys together during this year?
Yes, we go there.
It's on the calendar, the One My Life Foundation.
I want to let you understand what this is. So, yeah, they'll probably explain a little bit more, I believe. A little bit. No, when did this one take place? Okay. Are you taking a photo?
We were both tapped in the phone rings, and my phone was ringing. So riding it out.
What are you doing here? What's your name? Thank you. Yeah, the whole series of topics and learning. Some of it was basic hate crime training.
Yeah, we did that. Were you part of weekly meetings? Yeah, where you trying to get like L&I and sanitation. Okay. Yeah, I was.
You know what? We started collecting the stories. There are some video-based things in those areas of creativity. We try to get action. So views are different. And in some places, they don't get counted. Did he run
No, but anyway.
registration. I did. I've been doing that forever, and I it's like, where do you want to go? You know, tell me.
So we're getting back together, we're going to our seats, we're getting ready to start and go again. If you can see me, clap your hands once. If you can hear me, clap your hands once. If you're gonna stop talking in a few seconds, clap your hands twice. And we're back. Thank you all, we're back. For those on the outside, we're getting started in a minute. If there are volunteers up top, can we shuffle people in, please? We're back. How wonderful. You have a gorgeous smile. Thank you. And we're back. It's 11:01. We'll get started at 11:02. Yes, a whole minute. You had me crying, lady. You had me crying. Are we ready? So this next session, faith leaders as bridge builders, encountering hate with dialogue and healing. And I'm not going to say much, and you're not going to see me much after this. But I met Reverend Sean Harvey, and he says, call me Sean, but I call him Reverend. I'm Jamaican, we use titles and reverends. Amen? Reverend Sean Harvey, I met last year at the Eradicate Hate conference in Pittsburgh. He was there, Don was there. And he was phenomenal leading a panel on faith leaders as bridge builders. And I said, we have to get him for this. So he came all the way from Philadelphia, so thank you for being here. And he is going to be leading this panel. So goodbye.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Good morning. How you doing? It's great to be here. It's a little dicey coming in. A little bit of rain. Said a few extra prayers. So, thank you, Dr. Nikki, and thanks for having us. We're looking forward to having an engaging panel with my esteemed panelists. And we're going to talk about, as we're gathering at this time when so many communities are feeling the strain of division and hate. And faith leaders are often the ones that people turn to in moments of fear, grief, uncertainty. As spiritual caregivers and community leaders, you are uniquely positioned to shape how communities respond to conflict and difference. And we want to share insights from our perspectives. This conversation is a chance to explore how faith leaders are doing that work in real and practical ways. Today we'll hear stories, strategies, reflections from leaders who are actively strengthening empathy and compassion, repairing fractures, and building bridges across differences in their communities. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and then I'll give a little bit more of my story after we hear from the panelists. So we'll start with Reverend Dr. Mihi.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am Reverend Mihi Kim Court. I am one of the co-pastors of First Presbyterian Church, which is in downtown Annapolis. Usually folks don't know who we are or where we are because we're between St. Anne's, which is on Church Circle. Everybody knows St. Anne's, and then St. Mary's, which is just down the street from us. So we're the church in between the two big churches. We've been there since 1846, so we were established quite early, and then became the National Naval Memorial church in 1946, so a year after the Naval Academy was established. And my spouse and I, we've been co-pastors for about 6-ish years, since 2020. We moved here from Bloomington, Indiana. And it's been a little bit of a coming out because we mostly have been on the East Coast, but I'm learning that Maryland is a little bit, we're the Mid-Atlantic, so I'm learning about the DMV and what it means to be in Maryland and in the county, and it's been a joy to be here, so I'm grateful to be here as well.
My name is Rabbi Ari Goldstein. I'm the rabbi at Temple Beth Shalom in Arnold, which is, for those of you, and by the way, forgive the rest, I am on the mend here as opposed to getting better. This is good for me. Behind Safeway and Arnold Road is kind of broken. And I've been the rabbi there for 21 years. So what do you think about that? She's the new kid on the block compared to me. Both of you guys are. And it's we're a Reform congregation. There are other synagogues in this community. Obviously, there are other churches in Anne Arundel County, but there are also other synagogues in Anne Arundel County. There's a conservative synagogue called Kol Shalom and an Orthodox synagogue called Knesset Israel Chabad. So there are other Jewish institutions in Anne Arundel County. But we are proud to be, I think, the biggest one, and we are proud to also to be connected on many levels and in many ways to the county and our community. And I specifically think, just if you would indulge me for about 12 seconds here, I see Commissioner Awad, who is back there, and so many people on, so many members of the Anne Arundel County Police Department are with us in our congregation daily, and they're there to protect us and our congregation, the students who are there, the kids in the preschool who are there. And it's become such an important part of who we are and what we do, and I think it's very much related to this conversation that we're having today. And so to see members of the police department here, I'm just grateful. Like, I'm staring at each one of you guys because I'm wondering, have you been to our synagogue recently? I don't know if I see anyone, people I recognize, but nonetheless, thank you so much. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland originally, although I don't think of myself as a Baltimore. Rather because I moved when I was 8. I moved to New Orleans, and my family's still in New Orleans. So I think of myself as a New Orleanian. However, born in Baltimore, so I do have a little bit of connection to this area originally. But having lived here for 21 years now, since then, I think that's probably my biggest connection. So thank you very much for having us, and I think it's your turn.
Thank you, Rabbi Ari, and Miki, it's an honor to be here on this panel with you both and to meet Sean through this process. It's really opened my eyes to a lot, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you all for listening to us. I hope we have some good things, some good wisdom maybe to share with you all, and I hope you brought some questions for us. My name is Peter Mayer, and I'm the rector of St. Margaret's Church in Annapolis. It's an Episcopal church. It is not the main church in Church Circle, that is St. Anne's. We are the church across a Severn Bridge from the city of Annapolis. But we like to be in the backwoods. We don't really mind that. I've been there for 10 years. I moved from Rhode Island to here, and we love it in Maryland. We absolutely love it. I don't think we would ever want to leave. This community has welcomed me. It's made me feel like I'm one of you, and that is just a great feeling to have as a pastor, right? I think the first time I met Ari was shortly after the shooting at Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, and I invited him out to lunch, and we talked about football a lot of the times. He's a Saints fan, I'm a Buccaneers fan. We've kind of shared that legacy since then, but this is a real important issue for me and for all of us as we go through these turbulent times now, where hate is becoming more and more a part of our everyday lives. I was kind of taken aback at the Super Bowl halftime show a little bit, not for anything that Bad Bunny did, but for the words that were on the big screen behind him. The only thing more powerful than hate is love. How many of us saw that? I got to tell you, is hate that powerful? Is hate the second most powerful force in the universe? I think maybe we're giving it too much credit, but we certainly can't dismiss it. So I'll turn it back over to you, Sean.
And now I'm just sitting with, this idea of our roles as how do we bring love to hate. So my name is, again, Sean Harvey. I'm an interfaith minister. When I was in seminary, the idea was to minister as a verb. And so my ministry is not in a congregation, but to do soul healing work with men. And so my question is often, how do we engage the hardest to reach men and the hardest to access systems to learn new ways to elevate men across cultures? And I do that in a number of ways, one of which is I'm also a fellow at American University and the Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab, PARA, and teaching a course called Men, Masculinity, and Extremism, looking at the psychological drivers and cultural influences that are radicalizing American men and boys. So being able to really, so I'll be bringing another layer into the conversation as we engage. But I really want to start with, when Dr. Nikki saw our program as chaplains as bridge builders, and it's evolved to faith leaders as bridge builders. And so I want to just start with the opening question. What does it mean to you to be a bridge builder in your faith community?
I think I go back to the passage from Isaiah that we actually, I think, read on Ash Wednesday. A lot of Christian churches did. And the prophet writes that we are called to be repairers of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. Several years ago, we started a Truth, Reconciliation, Reparations task force. And we wanted to educate ourselves within our own homogenous, largely white, very affluent church to our history as far as it relates to chattel slavery. Because I believe 2 of the first 6 vestry members of St. Margaret's were slave owners. And several of our first dozen rectors owned slaves. As a matter of fact, the land on which we sit was farmland that was farmed by slaves of the 5 or 6 descendant families on the Broadneck Peninsula. So we have a lot to discover and a lot to wrestle with in our church. We did that wrestling, and then we partnered with a group called the Annual Father's Day Foundation, which is largely a group of African American men from Asbury Broadneck United Methodist Church. Under their pastor, Stephen Tillett, we were able to offer an apology to that church from St. Margaret's Church that covered our engagement with chattel slavery and the lack of work done in the civil rights era as 2 marks that St. Margaret's apologized for. And we also made a commitment to working with Asbury Broadneck from that point on to build a better world. So it wasn't really about necessarily atoning for the past, although that was done. I was telling Ari before, my parents and grandparents came here after slavery was ended, so I could very easily, as a cis white male, say, well, it's not my problem, I wasn't a part of that. But it is my responsibility to build a better world. And it's my responsibility to try to work for justice in the world that we have now, right? And so I feel like my role as a faith leader in my community is to constantly build those bridges and remind people that our role is to repair the breach, wherever that breach is found. Like, Sean talked about extremism. It's a huge breach in our culture that we feel like it's not enough to just be in the middle. We've got to be extreme on one end or the other. So how can we be people of peace, of reconciliation, and most of all, people of justice?
Well, as I was thinking about many of these questions ahead of time, I was aware that, hate is such a broad thing. And we all have, or we can all maybe have experiences in which we felt like we were the victims of hate. And so often when you think of yourself as a victim, then what it means is you don't also meditate on how you are a perpetrator. because you're too busy thinking about yourself as the victim. And for sure, in the Jewish community, this rings very loud for me, because I feel as if I'm consistently kind of on the receiving end of hate, and therefore my strategy is always, how do I address feeling like the hate is coming towards me or towards my community? But I think also, maybe, so to best answer the question, is in that feeling of being a victim, that doesn't mean that we are not responsible to also see when hate is coming from. And I think that perhaps if there is the biggest responsibility that I have as being, I don't know the word bridge builder, but the biggest responsibility I have within my community is to make sure that we don't ignore nor downplay the feelings that my community has with regularity. And I'm saying now it's happening every single day. And truly the issue now is for me to distill when something is really an emergency versus when something is just, but also to recognize that just because we can be a victim doesn't mean that we also don't have that in us too. And so I think that of all things, one of my great responsibilities is to make sure that my community isn't blinded to the times in which they or we are acting in ways which are communicating values which are not our highest values.
Wow, super helpful and insightful so far. I'm just thinking a lot. I mean, I feel like there's so many ways into this question, but thinking a little bit more about my own positionality as a woman of color. There aren't a ton of women. I mean, there are a lot more women in my position. We're a clergy of mainline churches, Presbyterian Church USA specifically. There aren't still as many women of color, and so I occupy a sort of tenuous, precarious position sometimes, and so I'm definitely mindful of that. I've been thinking a lot about what hate means and looks like and where it comes from. And even if we don't have, again, a white mainline church, a very liberal church in the city of Annapolis, even though we don't have or have experienced as a community overt forms of hate or racism or any kind of ism, I think that folks in my particular community are a little bit more aware. When I came on in 2020, it was about a year after that the Atlanta spa shootings happened in 2021. And then during COVID, of course, we may remember there was an uptick, a huge uptick around anti-Asian violence and anti-Asian sentiment and hatred. And, you know, of course, that's been around in this country for hundreds of years. But people were becoming more aware of it. And so being able to share some of those experiences, in my perspective, with my community, sparked the desire for them to create a committee on anti-racism and racial equity. So they've been doing a lot of education and sort of just consciousness raising, and that's been really important to our community. But they've also been, so this is another little plug for something called Arundel Connecting Together. It's a community organizing network that's been around since 2016, I believe. Our church was really foundational in helping to set up this network. But it has really become a practice of bridge building for the community because it's by nature interreligious and interracial. And so folks are able to gather with people in the community and in the county around issues that matter to everyone in the community, and also be able to connect with people across values. And so I think that's been really instrumental in terms of helping our church to be bridge builders themselves in their own way. For me as a leader, I think that when I think of being a bridge builder, it's very basic. It just means showing up. Showing up in places that where people are needed. Related to ACT is showing up to hearings, it's showing up to vigils and protests and demonstrations. But then showing up with like a bag of groceries for families that need it, or showing up to read books with an organization called SCARE. It's this reading intervention program in the community as well. So that's to me very basic, but super powerful. It's just simply showing up for other people.
So we have panelists who are excellers, and so we're jumping questions, and they're answering questions. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, and we'll start with Miki. So on the other end, what do you find is usually? So we started to dig into the hate, like what is hate, the hate conversation. What do you find is usually sitting underneath hate in the world right now? And how do we help move people? How do we help move people towards connection and compassion?
Oh goodness, that's a $1 million question, isn't it? I mean, I think in the U.S. there's a particular emergence of hate. It's rooted in our politics. We've become super polarized, very partisan. It's become so rooted in identity politics as well. So we can't even talk to each other without being immediately suspicious if we find out they check off or tick off certain boxes. Our church, again, is pretty progressive and liberal. We're not very purple as I thought that we were, but we do have a number of members that tend to be a little bit more like socially and politically conservative. So to have ongoing and regular conversations with folks, we have something called the Fellowship of the Bean. It's centered around coffee on Sunday mornings. So if you go to any church, you know that coffee, I'm sure any religious community, coffee is very central. It is the cup of salvation. But so they gather every Sunday, somebody brings up a topic around, usually related to religion, politics, and culture. And so we get a wide range of perspectives, and people practice talking to each other amidst differences, amidst disagreement, and it's really learning how to see each other with dignity. So going back to the question about hate and some of the seeds of hate, I think it's recognizing that there's a sort of fear around scarcity maybe, there's a fear around like power is being lost or control or resources, and hate sort of festering and blossoming from those kinds of seeds. And so to even maybe address what could be the problems that emerge on the surface as hate, whether it's hate crimes or hate violence, or just the ongoing sort of anger that people have towards one another. We're trying to just have conversations with each other and get into spaces with one another when we don't agree with each other immediately. And then to learn how to have not even just like civil conversation, but like engaged, intentional listening with one another. And it can get heated, and people will say like, they'll call on the president or they'll call on certain representatives. But there's always this sense of mutual respect and this realization that we're in community together, we need each other, we're not going to get through any of this without these relationships, without this community. So, I mean, I think just in general, just this sense of scarcity, this sense of somehow something is getting lost and we're losing it, and then it's this sort of frantic sense that we've got to recover whatever it is that we're losing. And that festers and turns into some sort of anger and resentment, and then into hatred.
It's funny, I turned to you and said, I'll say something, and then you then started speaking about the very thing I wanted to say. But I'm going to no, it's okay. I didn't nudge you, so yeah. That this fear is what leads to hate. There's no question. And at least to me, I know I sound very Star Wars. I can't remember there was some quote in Star Wars like fear and hate leads to the dark side or something. I can't remember exactly. I'm sure there are few people here who might know the actual quote better. But it's kind of that we have fears, whether the fear is of our own security, whether the fear is that we are going to be marginalized, whether the fear is that we are going to be, our status is going to change, and people have fears. And whether they are legitimate, I mean, I guess all fear is legitimate, but whether what's behind, that if it's just selfishness or if it's still fear. And I remember hearing many years ago about a line in which someone says, do you love me? And the answer, yes, of course. And if so, do you know what brings me pain? And as a symbol of love is, do you know what makes another person feel pain? And I think that part of our job and our obligation as leaders, but everyone in this room too, is to appreciate so often that behind hate is fear, and please don't misunderstand me saying that regardless of how a person treats, you should just love them anyway. I'm not there. I'm just saying that if you have the capacity to, if you aren't in enough pain yourself, if you have the capacity to see another person's hate within the prism of fear, then it generally leads to a modicum of compassion. And with that compassion, those are generally, in my opinion, the seeds which lead to growth. And because we can either choose to respond to hate with anger, with dismissal, which, by the way, are human, and I would never question anyone doing that. But we can also try to take it one step further and see another person in their weakness and see that the hate is coming from that place. And if we can see that person in that place, then at least it leads to, again, don't want to go to this place of connection because that suggests that I want to be connected to a person who's filled with hate. I don't. But I do want to allow someone the opportunity to grow and allow a relationship to grow. And I think the only way to do that is by seeing a person in their difficulties and weaknesses, even if it's manifested in hate.
Yeah, the thing that challenges me is Christians talk a really good game on this. Love your enemies, pray for those who hate you. What do I do as a pastor who gets up into their pulpit on a Sunday morning and sees a group of white men walk in with racist t-shirts or hoods or something symbolizing their intention or just their spirit of hate? How do I respond to that as a priest, as a follower of Jesus and his tenets? I've always wrestled with that because I don't know what I would do.
So I would add, so adding to the deep-seated fear, and I often call it deep-seated fear. We'll often talk about there's a stew, and in the ingredients in the stew of radicalization, it's often outdated models, faulty teachings, toxic conditioning, deep-seated fear, shame, untouched grief, especially for men who haven't had access to emotionality, and then unresolved grievance, a sense of not mattering. This line that goes up to when I go from hope to hopeless, that's where it becomes dangerous. And so I am someone who engages with men who are on the path to radicalization or holding extremist values and beliefs. So I have to challenge myself constantly to be able to hold their hate. And there's something in the last presentation that just beamed at me, the ventilation and validation. And that just spoke to me in terms of how do we listen, how do we care? And more importantly, how do we get curious? How do we separate the humanity of a person from the views of the person? Love the humanity of the person, and yet get curious about the views, especially if we hate those views. Or just
and not necessarily forgive the views, by the way. I wasn't,
True.
what I was saying was not, it didn't come with and just forgive because everything is fine. Because you now see that, hardly. It was only merely to recognize that fear and weakness is the source of it. And if you appreciate that, it enables you to kind of make one step closer. But that doesn't mean it's like a blanket forgiveness. I hardly believe that at all.
Now, what I'm appreciating is how you're talking about the inner work that's required, both for yourself and, I think one of the things that I keep finding again and again is if I think this person is broken, then I might write them off. If I see this person as wounded, then there's hope, right? So it's not forgiveness, but it's like, is this a step onto their healing journey to be able to bring them to a different place and bring them back to a center of their own core humanity? But it's definitely not about just blanket forgiveness and here's a check. So now we're going on with these questions. I mean, big clicks next. What skills, because I think we touched on how you navigating the political landscape. If there's anything you want to add on how you're navigating the political landscape, we'll give you space, or we can move on.
I'll go there a little bit. It's been probably one of the biggest challenges of my career, is how to navigate through the political landscape. And the reason why is because there are plenty of times, I'm going to try to be careful about how I say this. There are plenty of times in which I monumentally object and disagree with things that are going on politically. But at the same time, I am aware that in this landscape of ours, that others don't agree with me. And it's my job to be a source of spiritual connection and warmth and welcome, openness to people who want to come to my synagogue, or is my job to make statements, political statements, and try to communicate what I think is right and wrong behavior. And as cathartic as it might be for me to go to the latter, I know that my job is the former. And so it's been one of the great challenges because it takes so much restraint to hold back from saying some of the things that I want to say. And it takes also a lot of restraint not even to go to those places so others can talk about it. Because I want to also kind of, for lack of a better word, just keep the congregation from and allowing that to be a conversation within my community. Because if it is, then it's gonna serve as, it's so polarized right now. I mean, I'm not saying anything new to anybody here, that it just, only thing that, I would love to think that growth would happen, but unfortunately I just think that more division would happen. And so my instinct is to stay as far away from it as I possibly can. And that's unfortunate, because there are plenty of times in which I should be speaking out about what's right and what's wrong, at least in my opinion. But I just don't feel like, I feel like I'm weakening my community by doing so. Because as you described, you'd like to think of yourself as a purple congregation, and we very much are a purple congregation. I mean, I don't think there's any type of, I think to a degree we're purple. I think that we're not a place in which you're hearing too much anything that's truly nasty. However, what you might though hear is defense of things which are questionable. And in that case, again, I just feel like it's going to lead us down a bad path. And so I tend to stay away from it. But that's been one of the great challenges, because it's personally difficult for me. And I think there are plenty of times in which there's a responsibility for me to say something, but I'm just kind of, it's not fear for what's going to happen to me, but just fear for hurting our community. So, that's it for me.
I'm lucky because I'm the head clergy at St. Margaret's, so I'm the rector, and I've been there for 15 years. So with that comes a lot of trust that I've built up. And you're not my congregation, so I can say what I want to here. I know I'm being recorded, but it's so hard to preach nowadays. But I can't imagine what it's like to preach as a woman, person of color. To preach as a person who is seen as a problem by our government, is seen as problematic, or someone to put on the sidelines or detain. So as a white man, I have privilege and a responsibility to show up for my brothers and sisters in ways that they might not be able to speak for themselves. Whether they are an associate priest or whether they don't have the tenure that I might have. So therefore, I have to do that. And when I do it, I have to be super careful about the words that I use. And I'm so grateful for the people that I know disagree with me, the people who are on the other side of the argument that I am, when they say, you said that very well. Because I never want to make anyone feel defensive, but I want to make everyone feel challenged. Everyone on every side of the problem. I want them to feel challenged about how we can do better, right? But there are things that need to be said, especially by white churches. And so I try to say those things as much and as clearly as I can without splintering our congregation, which again is the real fear. But I also know that there are more important things at play right now in our country than keeping our congregations together. And I can say that now because I only see 2 congregants here. So.
I think it really has become interesting to think about our roles as clergy and churches in the political landscape. I mean, especially as of late, when that policy was overturned in terms of, churches and clergy can now endorse candidates and whatnot. And I remember getting a ton of emails about that, and asking a little bit more about what is the church's role in politics and whatnot. And I think that, we still think that religion and politics can't mix, and unfortunately it has already. So we're in this now. Do you want to have a good start?
I think we moved it away with good.
And I think often there's a Christian writer and theologian and historian, her name's Diana Butler-Bass, she's Episcopalian. She reminds us that Jesus was political. He cared about the people, and he talked about a kingdom that was about mutuality, about people being healed, about people being fed, about people in community and belonging. So yeah, sometimes I will have said things in the pulpit about Ukraine, about Palestine, about Roe v. Wade, about our queer sisters and brothers. And I've gotten emails, and I've gotten people who have left the church. And we have this banner on the outside of our sanctuary, and it's, you've seen those posters. It's like, we believe, like Black Lives Matter and love is love, et cetera, et cetera. That's been torn down a couple of times, or maybe one time the wind took it away. But either way, we get emails and letters from the community and from church members asking about that, and I just open up a conversation with them and try to see it as an opportunity to talk about Jesus, to talk about who he is in the gospel, and who we are as a church and a community. And it's not easy, and conflict and disagreement, and that usually happens when we're hitting politics. That's not going to be pretty. But being in community is messy, because humans are messy. And if we shy away from that, then we are doing a disservice to the people we're serving and the community in which we find ourselves. So we do politics.
I'm going to stay with you. This is going to be our last question before we open it up for Q&A and discussion. So I want you to just pick one value. What is a deeply held shared value that creates the strongest opening for bridge building across difference? I'd like each of you to come up with the one value that you think is the greatest door opener.
I think this one's easy for me. It's the value of seeing God in everyone and knowing that we're all created in the image of God and knowing that we have way, 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 way more that connects us and that makes us the same, as opposed to the very small differences which seem to be the things which people latch onto and notice the differences when they're ignoring the vastness of the similarities. That was easy. I got to talk first and steal all of yours, because if you guys aren't saying the same thing,
So I will co-sign that for sure. Bobby Day for sure. I'm just going to go back to the Eucharist, which is communion. Everybody's got to eat. So I'm just thinking about all the ways that we need support systems and structures so that people can eat, so that people can be around the table, so people can be welcomed and find belonging and find identity in the God of the universe, who is the God of love. And the God of love wants us to eat. And maybe that's like from my Korean American background. That's the question that moms will ask. That's the first thing they say to you. And it's a way that they say, I love you, is have you eaten? It's about eating. That's the shared value for me.
I'll go off script a little bit and say that it's inclusion for me. And I definitely co-sign what Ari and Mihi have said. But at St. Margaret's, our altar, we say this every Sunday, that our altar is not an Episcopal altar or a St. Margaret's altar. It's really God's table. And therefore, everyone, no matter what your denomination is, where you find yourself in your spiritual journey, your sexual orientation, your gender identification, your sports team affiliation, or your political persuasion, you are all welcome to receive communion at this church. We say that because a lot of people will go to other denominational worship services like a funeral and be denied communion because they are not a member of that denomination. And we feel like if we can bring people in, that's where Jesus would want us to be, around the same table together, eating the same food. So to Mihi's point, for us it is about the Eucharist, but for St. Margaret's at least, and for me, it's always been about an open table where everyone, no matter what views you've held, no matter what you've done or haven't done in your life, you are all welcome to that entry point.
And for me, it's compassion. How do we see the suffering in others? How do we see suffering in ourselves? Holding suffering, holding compassion for our greatest adversary, and equally important, having compassion for ourselves. And now we're going to open it up to some Q&A, and I think Dr. Mickey will give us some instructions.
So there are instructions on the screen. Just a reminder to raise your hands, and we will identify folks across the room. So far we have 1 and 2 and many. So Abby, you're coming up here to help me. And wait for a staff member to call on you. Once identified, press and hold the button to speak. Everyone got it? Jennifer?
Jennifer Mizrahi, and I know that Rabbi Goldstein has to do a lot to protect his worshipers and other people who
Jennifer, press and hold.
I know Rabbi Goldstein has to do a lot to protect his congregation physically because of the hate crimes, and I don't think many people know what he goes through. And I wondered, Rabbi, if you could talk through the security threat and how you approach it. And you talk a little bit about the police being allies. What does it take to keep the congregation safe?
Wow. Well, for starters, thank you. For starters, we have so many cameras in our building and outside our building right now that you would think that it was, the White House of Fort Knox. We've got a camera literally on every single inch of our property. We have police officers all day long. Whenever there are people in the building, there is a police officer, an off-duty police officer who comes, and oftentimes there's more than one. because maybe, there's an officer kind of doing rounds or on patrol and then kind of stops by as well. We have a private security company that we also employ. So, it's an honor for us, and we don't like doing it, but to be able to work with police officers is meaningful, but it costs. Hiring a security company costs. We have, for every event we do, there is registration. For every event, and that includes regular Shabbat, Sabbath services. We ask people to register. If they don't, then we just ask them a few extra questions when they arrive and point them out to both the security and the police who are there. Not as this is a person who we have a problem with, but rather this is a person who didn't register ahead of time. And so we just want to put it on the radar screen. We have additionally, depending on the event or the program, we might have multiple people there. We have members of the synagogue who are serve as ushers. We have training for people now because the threat is not just vandalism, but now we've learned that threats can be quite violent as well, and so it costs a lot of money. It's been a real drain on our kind of resources, but it's something which people in our community have come to expect, and so they expect it to be there. In fact, whenever we don't have, from time to time, I feel like I'm giving away secrets here. From time to time, we might not have an officer present, and we might just have our private security there. And when that happens, a person might say, "Where's the police?" Right? Because that's what people are noticing. And so the fact is that there's now become an expectation of it. So it's almost become so much, and we're just doing the best that we can to keep up with the costs that are associated with having your own private police force or something like that.
So Claudia is next. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it.
Good morning. Thank you all so much. I think oftentimes our faith communities can be incubators of hate. And I think a lot of times there is I don't want to say coddling, but a protection of those who possess hateful ideologies. What ways are you all kind of intentionally protecting your congregations from holding these kinds of hateful ideologies? And maybe even more importantly, what ways are you providing pastoral care to those who are experiencing the hate, almost kind of prioritizing the care for them rather than prioritizing care for the people who are doing the hate true? Does that make sense? So I think sometimes in our faith communities, we could spend a little bit more time caring for those who are doing the hate to ensure that they feel like they belong, to ensure that they feel like they are included and that they are not left out. And those who are actually on the experiential side of that hate now do not feel safe within our faith communities because we have not actually done any pastoral care to those who have experienced it.
Sure. I'm aware that sometimes I don't necessarily, I'll kind of dance around politics, but if there is any type of hate that's happening from within our building, it's shut down immediately. That's not acceptable. A person is able to have various different political, or they can kind of do their dance about defending their political opinions. But if it gets turned into a place, and I can't necessarily stop what's in a person's mind, but if it is communicated in any way, that is immediately called out. There's no coddling of a person who speaks in neither people hate against another person within my community or hate against another person outside of my community. There's no room for that within our community, in our congregation. And so I completely hear you, but as you were talking about it, I was like, boy, I've never really experienced it because it would be, if I heard such a thing, it would nauseate me. And I would communicate that nausea, hopefully quite literally spewing onto a person so they would experience how terrible such a thing is and how within our walls. That language is just unacceptable. So it's a hard one, and I'm not answering it perfectly because I can't imagine it happening, but maybe I'm just delusional, but I can't imagine it.
I think we're all delusional to some degree because we love our congregations, and we can't imagine that someone in our congregations would also be a member of the 3% Club or another white supremacy group. But I'm sure it happens more than I would care to admit. I try to counter that hate whenever I find it because it's usually said in a joking manner, but I counter it with love. And we've had people leave our church and they'll say to me things like, well, I want a place that preaches biblical sermons. We're like, dude, every sermon I preach is from the Bible, literally. But I know what they're getting at. They don't want to hear all the love. They don't want to hear all the, hey, we need to make amends. We need to do better as far as justice goes. We need to feed the hungry and clothe the naked. They don't want to hear that. And so they usually just leave our church. So I haven't had to have those hard conversations. But on the flip side, we do look out for people who are experiencing hate. Mostly teachers, librarians, first responders, people that are on the front lines of dealing with hate and extremism.
So I want to just add, because I do connect with a number of evangelical pastors. And so I think we're in a lot of purple congregations. When you're in a red congregation, what does that look like? And so I think that's why, even just adding that question at the end, what are the shared values? So if we're talking about the values of Christ, if we're talking about the values, especially in these types of denominations, I think it's part of teaching discernment. I think part of it is really saying, what do these values actually mean? And how are you not intellectualizing them, but viscerally living them and embodying them? And I think that then takes away, then you have an opportunity to be in inquiry with congregants, to say, okay, this crosses a line, and at the same time, and this is the impact. And these are the folks that are being impacted. And I think what I find in a lot of these conversations is it's very easy to say the other because it's not directly impacting me. But when you can start to make the connections of, no, it's in your congregation, it's in your community, it's in your family, then it becomes personal and then it has a different attention. So I find that it's a different type of conversation, but it's really taking folks to get their heads started.
Thank you. My question is for Reverend Mayor. First of all, thank you so much for the efforts you put into getting an apology for chattel slavery. That's 250 years of pernicious history and pain. I'm wondering how you went about creating your plan for convincing your membership, your church, that this is the right thing to do to issue that apology. Because as you said yourself, you came after so that all of us come after chattel slavery, but it still is transgenerational. The hatred is transgenerational, and the harms are transgenerational. So how did you go about convincing your congregation that this was the right thing to do?
I think, to answer quickly, we did a survey, and we realized that about 70% of our congregation would be supportive of this. 10% were 20% were on the fence, didn't really care one way or the other, and there were 10% that were kind of dead set against it. Every step along the way we were transparent. We talked about what we were doing, we talked about how it was going to be done, and we gathered input. We invited people to show up and speak. And some people did speak against what we were trying to do. For example, reparations. The thing was money. And what do white things love? What do white people love more than life? It's money. We have a large endowment, And so a lot of our congregation was saying, well, this apology is fine as long as we don't have to pay anything. And so when we came with an apology to Asbury Broadneck, and Pastor Tillett was there, we said, this is what we're going to say. But we realized that there has to be something attached to this to make it real. And we talked about that in our congregation and what we were willing to do, and we had some ideas. They talked about it in their congregation and said, what are some things that we would like St. Margaret's to help us with? And it was not a blank check. In fact, it was helping with grant writing. And so we've written with them, I believe, 4 grants since then, through the years to help with oral histories. I think we've even given a grant to Asbury Broadneck for oral histories, but then also through our Diocesan Reparations Fund. So we've partnered with them in various stages along the way to help them do the work that they need to do, right? And so it wasn't easy, and I think some people we had to just say, this is what we're going to do. And if you want to stay, we'd love to have you stay. And they have, by and large. We haven't really lost any people due to this thing. And as a matter of fact, I think some people who were against it are now for it.
I must admit, I lost one of the hands. There was one before. Here you go. Perfect.
I got a hold of them. I'll get to the question. I won't make a dissertation.
Don't.
Dr. making I found myself asking somebody who I want to support in the community because they're doing good works. But for some reason out of the blue, I go, well, I hope you're not a Trump supporter. I don't even know where that came from out of my head. But for some reason, I figured if they could answer that, then that would define whether I give money or help in different ways to support this really great organization. I've been reworking that in my head, but listening to all the conversation, and I believe one of the panelists said everyone needs to be challenged. So I remember a long time ago in management class, they said it's okay to expect better or expect people to do better or do things. So, but that's getting lost a little bit because I want to hear the other side's opinion or political, like face to face, not on a cell phone, not on a blog. But then I also want to hold them to an expectation. Do you hold parishioners, do you hold people to an expectation to do better than what they're doing so that we can work through this? Because on this side, we have good support, but on the opposite side, on the big side, they're fighting against that. There's more pressure coming from the top down. So how do we hold people to do better? And okay, that's the question. How do we hold people to do better? Expectations.
One person responds.
There's a lot of ways in. I mean, it's that one-on-one conversation, being in relationship with people, being in community with people, just constantly showing up in their lives beyond whatever the issue is, whatever the political position is, whatever we're in conflict about, to continue to show up for them over and over. And I make a point to preach it from the pulpit as well. So part of the challenge is to keep on bringing up that question, apart from whatever alignment, whatever political party that they're a part of, to keep on, and that's a challenge for me too, to keep seeing people as they are, as human beings. We're trying to figure this out. Some of us are screwing it up, but we're going to still love you. We're going to still be in solidarity with you. We're going to still do this thing called life together. So just not giving up on folks.
One last question because we swapped out the person, so get the last one.
And I promise this will not be a dissertation. So as a follow-up to Reverend Mayer,
You said that 70% of your congregation was for the apology, 20% on the fence, 10% against. How would your approach have been different if the numbers had been flipped? 10% for, 20% on the fence, and 70% against?
That's a great question. And it's similar to the question that I had before, but what do I do if? I'm very lucky to have the congregation that I have. And I don't think that's by accident. I think we fit each other pretty well. But to the previous questioner, how do we challenge each other to be better? So I would like to think that I would have taken those numbers and we wouldn't have gone as fast. We might have had to be more intentional about what we did. But to some degree, the gospel, as I believe it, calls us to do some things, like restore justice, like stand up for the oppressed and the marginalized. And those are not debatable. So how we do those things might be looked at. But ultimately, we're still going to be on this road, or else I'm not going to be their pastor anymore. And that's the hard thing, because you don't want to leave a good church that you're happy at because they don't want to do reparations. But I'm lucky that we were in a place where we were able to move forward with what we could. And I just wish it could have been more, and I hope that it continues to be more in the future.
Thank you. We'd like to thank the panelists. Give them a hand, please. It's always good when you're having a meeting and nobody wants to leave. This video is between you and lunch. We agreed to an hour. This might push over by probably 7 minutes for the lunch period. You will get your hour. So we'll push everything back by 7 minutes if everyone's okay with that. October 30th to November 11th, we did a series of webinars, Hate Bias Forum webinars, titled In Our Own Voices. It was very important for us to have communities, organizations, tell their stories in their voices. The first webinar was from the police department, and it was well received. And we've used it as a tool. So we've sliced and diced it, and it's on our website. And I'm encouraging you to visit our website, No Hate Here website. And so you are going to hear one of those clips that we created. And technology is okay.
Good evening to you, and thank you for joining us on this webinar.